Ready? Good afternoon. This afternoon we come to you with heavy hearts given the civil unrest that occurred last night into the early hours of the morning in our city. As the city manager and as the director of emergency management for the city of Lynchburg, I have declared a local emergency due to civil unrest. This unrest has impacted the city and its citizens by the damage and injury to persons and property. Such civil unrest is making additional demands upon city public safety services, including police, fire, emergency medical services, and emergency communications, as well as other services. Further, the potential exists for the disruption of services provided to citizens, as well as the disruption to travel and transportation within and around the city. During the duration of the local emergency and with this declaration, I may exercise all emergency powers authorized under applicable state law and the ordinances, resolutions, regulations, and approved plans of the city of Lynchburg. In the absence of a formal declaration of a curfew, I ask citizens for your protection and the protection of others to adhere to a voluntary curfew today between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. tomorrow. Exceptions to this voluntary compliance include the exceptions included in the Governor's Executive Order number 64. This local state of emergency shall stay in place until further notice and action by City Council. I will request that City Council confirm the declaration of local emergency at its next regularly scheduled meeting on Tuesday, June 9th. Mayor Tweedy will now offer remarks, followed by Police Chief Ryan Zudema, followed by former Mayor and Reverend Carl B. Hutcherson, President of the NAACP, and Nicholas George, founder of the Listening and Local Mental Health Professional. Mayor Tweedy will wrap up this press conference with a brief question and answer period. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I move on to the remarks that I had initially prepared, I want to make the following statement. In the past few days, we have seen great turmoil throughout this country. In many of our cities, people have taken to the streets, born out of frustration, and unfortunately, some have turned violent. In our own city, we saw last night what can happen when things become violent. I don't want the fact to be lost that many of our citizens have peacefully held vigils and demonstrations without incidents, and I am proud of our citizens who have been peaceful in their protests. The violence and destruction of property that occurred last night is unacceptable. To those of you who participated in the criminal acts last night and who may be patting yourselves on the back this morning, I say to you that you have done nothing to advance the cause of equality. We must each take personal responsibility for our actions and hold ourselves accountable. I fully support the city manager's local declaration of emergency and support her call for a voluntary curfew in the absence of our authority to declare a mandatory curfew. I call on this community, all members of this community, to let cooler heads prevail. We should be better than this. I pray that we are. I pray that we can be. Last week, many of us watched in horror as George Floyd, an African-American man, was murdered by officers of the Minneapolis police force. Before that came the video of another African-American man hunted down and shot in the streets of Georgia, and the murder of Breonna Taylor during the execution of a no-knock warrant in Kentucky. These and so many other terrible acts of violence against people of color demonstrate an inescapable reality. Far too many members of our society are still not treated with the same empathy, kindness, fairness, or justice that they deserve, simply because of the color of their skin, the color of my skin. Bigotry can be subtle and corrosive. It is present when we use words that are insensitive, when we make snap judgments based on appearance, when we presume an understanding of another's reality that has been born of a lifetime of experiencing prejudice. I ask myself today, I ask myself this weekend, how can this still happen in a country graced with so much good fortune and rich ideals? But to the many people suffering the pain of discrimination, this is no surprise. This is daily life, where they encounter exclusion, fear, self-doubt, despair for lack of opportunity, unequal treatment, and sometimes, sadly, extreme violence. I've seen the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. shared a lot recently on social media, but I want to remind everyone that while certainly Dr. King is well known for his words of nonviolence, to which we all ascribe, he also said that history will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. As Dr. Ibram Kendi writes, you must be anti-racist because just not being not racist isn't enough anymore. Each of us bears responsibility to do everything in our powers to change the abhorrent reality confronting so many people. Ordinary actions some of us take for granted, like driving, jogging, playing in the park, visiting a store, or walking at night, can be risky for some members of our community because of systemic and deeply ingrained racism. We must rise up and speak out for inclusivity and equality, and we must organize to actively protect those who are most vulnerable. I have said to many in our community during the past couple of years that we only have one life. Each of us is given one opportunity to live with intentionality on how we treat others, how we respect others, how we have to learn from our history and vow not to repeat our country's worst of behaviors, deeds, and actions that to this day and in this hour continue to stain our country. We have to intentionally unify around our love for humanity, decency, and create our new pathway forward. Before, we were wondering how would we come out of the pandemic the last time I stood before you. Now we are wondering how will we stay together as a community and a nation, not allowing the distractions of divisiveness drive our narrative going forward. Together, collectively, our prayers for peace will be heard, our belief in justice will be proven. It should not take a death to make us realize that as a community, as a people, we are the same. Lynchburg, we are better than that. We are better than this. We should be a city built on inclusive excellence. We should hold each person accountable for inclusive behavior, and we should encourage courageous action. We should be a community built on trust by now, openness and civility that allows for honest conversations about difficult subjects, one that cares for and helps all members of our city, not just the few or the ones that look like we do, think like we do, or live like we do. We can hold different beliefs. We can be of different political parties, but we can still be civil to one another. There is no room for name-calling here. There's no room for racism or any of the isms. My call today is for you to personally commit to these behaviors, to reverse the legacy of racism in our community through your own compassion and commitment. By truly listening and striving to achieve an understanding of another's reality and circumstances and to rally for what is right. We cannot stand idle, and we cannot allow evil of any kind against any one of us prevail. Let us lead the way as a beacon of inclusivity and as a voice of change. That is our responsibility as leaders and as citizens. We have to help each other process and get through these times. We have to help our young adults, our children, and all families process what is happening in our society. And I will be back following the rest of those who will speak right now. Chief Suderman, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tweedy. So I'd like to start just by reiterating what we've put out as a police department on Friday, and that we too are outraged by the actions in Minneapolis. I don't think you're a human being if you're not outraged by actions like that. That has no place in law enforcement. That is not what we expect of our officers here, and that is not something that we are going to support, whether it's here or anywhere in our profession in this country. But we need to use these moments, as the mayor said, to unite us and not divide us. We have to take the time to listen to each other, understand the other person's perspective, and then use that. We need to listen to understand, not listen to respond. We support, as a police department, the right to protest. And as you've heard already here today, we've had several protests since the tragic events in Minneapolis that have gone off with no problems. We've had several people, in large numbers sometimes, get together with no problem at all, express their First Amendment rights, and we support that as a police department. If you saw any of the footage of that, you saw some of my officers driving by and thanking those protesters that were out there. Because again, we believe in the same thing they do. However, to be very clear, last night's actions turned into a riot, not a protest. There is a big difference between those two things. And as you've already heard said, Lynchburg, we are better than this. Period. We are better than this. I'm very proud of my officers' actions. They showed incredible restraint last night under very challenging circumstances. They were being pelted by rocks and bricks for the majority of the evening when they were interacting with these protesters. We had 2 officers that were injured. One went to the hospital after a brick literally broke the plexiglass shield off of his riot helmet and then struck him in the face. Had it not hit that shield, I don't want to think what may have happened to that officer. He is out of the hospital now, thankfully, and recovering after receiving some stitches. We had another officer that was struck in his shin with either a brick or rock as well. These were not just accidents where an officer tripped and fell. These were intentional acts by criminals trying to harm your police officers. I'm thankful for the support and the partnerships that we enjoy in our local law enforcement community. I'd like to thank the following agencies who either provided resources and/or personnel last night to assist us in dealing with these incidents. That is the Amherst County Sheriff's Office, the Bedford County Sheriff's Office, the Campbell County Sheriff's Office, the Lynchburg City Sheriff's Office, and the Virginia State Police. I was in constant communication with local, state, and federal law enforcement throughout the night to ensure we had the proper resources available to address the issues we were dealing with. In addition to the 2 officers I mentioned that were injured, we had 3 vehicles damaged. 2 of those vehicles are heavily damaged, and we are trying to determine now if they will be totaled or not. And when I say heavily damaged, we had people jumping up and down on the hoods, roofs, and windshields of our police cars after smashing out every window in those vehicles. One of those vehicles was shot with some type of a firearm 5 different times. Officers that were going back to that vehicle to retrieve it, 2 officers, were probably 20 to 25 feet away, heard 8 gunshots. 5 of those gunshots struck that vehicle. I don't know if they were intended for that vehicle or for those officers, but I am so grateful to stand before you today and not have to speak to you about one of my officers being shot. I hope that helps you understand the gravity of what was going on last night at this incident at 5th and Federal. We will be seeking additional charges on additional individuals other than those that have been arrested last night. We are in the process of investigating countless leads, as you can imagine. I'll add more to that at the end, but we know there are folks that are in our community that have information as to what took place last night. I would argue to you that it's your duty to come forward with that information to ensure we can have peace and tranquility in our city. I'd like to also take the opportunity to address a few rumors that are circling on social media. First and foremost, just because someone puts something on social media does not make it true or accurate. We've had a lot of rumors out there about the militia that was there at 5th and Federal. We did not invite the militia as a police department. We did not interact with the militia and ask them to do anything in support of our actions. In fact, on several occasions, we told the militia they needed to stay inside the restaurant at 5th and Federal for their safety and for the safety of our officers. We've also had information that's been relayed that people stated there have been shots fired by one of those individuals from the roof of 5th and Federal. We're investigating this claim to determine if it occurred, and obviously, if that did take place, appropriate charges will be pursued. I also want to let you know that throughout the night, and I was there for a good portion of the evening personally, there were probably 8 to 10 different occasions where we heard gunshots, not fired by anyone at the restaurant and not fired by any of our officers. This was an ongoing thing. We heard several different volleys of gunshots throughout the night. What we also heard and saw were several instances where fireworks and firecrackers were being used. It is very difficult in an urban environment to try and differentiate between what may be a gunshot, what may be a firecracker, depending on how close the officers are to that incident. We did have incidents where our officers deployed pepper spray for their safety. We also had incidents throughout the night where we deployed chemical agents in order to attempt to disperse the crowd after they were given multiple warnings to disperse and told that their assembly was unlawful. As with any time we use force of any kind, like those I just described, those are thoroughly investigated and researched to determine if the officer's actions were in compliance with our policy, and that will be the same that takes place for these incidents. What you'll see going forward from the LPD, beginning this afternoon and evening, you will see a heavy police presence tonight and for the foreseeable future. We are not going to let our city look like other cities you see around this country. We are better than this, Lynchburg. Absolutely better than this. There are absolute differences, as I said before, between a protest and a riot. We 100% support people peacefully protesting. We will not support, nor will we tolerate people rioting. It's that simple. We will pursue all criminal charges and prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law if you are out conducting criminal behavior as a part of these activities. We have to take pride in our city. This is your city. This is my city. This is our city. We can't let it be destroyed, regardless of how you feel about the Lynchburg Police Department, how you feel about a business, how you feel about what took place in Minneapolis. We understand the frustrations, as the mayor said. We want to talk through those with you, but we cannot accomplish that if people are out taking criminal acts in our city like they were last night. Again, if you have information about what happened last night, several people have sent information to us. In today's day and age, we know when these events take place, there are always folks with cell phone video. Some of them are streaming it live, some are recording it. If you have that video, we would highly encourage you to share that with us so we can help piece together what took place last night in areas some of our officers may not have been. For those of you who have already done that, we thank you. You are truly our partners at the Lynchburg Police Department. We value those partnerships. We want to work together to move our city forward, and we will be active participants in any dialogue surrounding this issue. That's all I have for now, and I'll certainly answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Madam Manager, Madam Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, council members, Chief Zudema, to all of you who have gathered here today, I represent the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Lynchburg branch. In the middle of that slogan, that title, is the word A, advancement. Advancement means that you go from one level to a higher level to a higher level. When we see things happen that have happened recently throughout this nation, we realized that there are some times when we have to take steps backward before we take steps forward. We need to look at ourselves as a nation, as a state, as a community, as a city. It is appalling that some people took advantage of an opportunity last night to do damage in Lynchburg, of all places. This has been a genteel city, and we don't do that kind of thing. It is appalling that people have to turn to violence in order to get their point across. I understand why people experience pain, because I've experienced pain myself. I understand why people don't realize that murder that murder is something that should not be tolerated by anybody. I understand that there are those people throughout our communities who make decisions for themselves which can be detrimental not only at that moment, but as time goes on. Those kinds of things have been happening throughout our nation, throughout our state, throughout our city. I applaud the fact that our city manager has made a decision to, at least this evening, call a curfew where cooler heads might prevail. We are ready, willing, not only through the NAACP, through other organizations, to assist in making and helping this community to be a better community. We want to work with our council. We want to work with those other city officials to make this city, our city, and it is all of our city, the most prosperous, the most livable place. Lynchburg has been called a place where we can come and work and play, but it has also been called a place where you can raise a family, where you can bring children. What are children going to think of us when they see the pain that takes place in our lives? Everybody knows I get emotional, and that's all right too. But we got to understand that in order to get beyond pain, we're going to have to develop strategies for healing. Healing sometimes is a harder thing to do, but I believe that we can do it if we make the efforts that are necessary to bring our community together, that are necessary to involve and include, be inclusive as a community, to make our city, our state, a place where all of us would be welcomed. Tomorrow morning, the NAACP is sponsoring a rally at the top of Monument Terrace, at the top of the steps. And we had a little theme. We had to sit down and think about it. But it is the most appropriate thing. Remember, that justice should be justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Hutcherson, and thank you to the city's leadership. Thank you. I was called on for reasons that surpass my understanding because, as far as I know, I'm just a guy. I'm proud to be a part of a community here in Lynchburg called The Listening that prides ourselves on listening to artists. We try to provide a platform for people to say what comes to mind, say what they need to be said, what needs to be heard. Since 2013, we've been active in the community. And before then, the idea for this organization came after President Obama's second election. We observed what was happening, the division, and there seemed to be very little listening going on. I'm glad that I didn't get this call until a few days ago, because last week I was angry. I was tired. I was exhausted of somehow trying to find the strength, the words, the energy to explain once again why people are tired. It seems that there are a lot of angry and tired people out in Lynchburg. Didn't expect that from Lynchburg, to be honest. I come from Newark, New Jersey, where we are more or less known for being vocal. I didn't expect this from Lynchburg. At this moment, I would like to call on every single person in the city to pause. Put down your phones. Pause. Listen. Listen, and don't listen with an agenda. Don't listen preparing to say something else. Don't get your arguments prepared. Listen. I call on our mental health professionals. There are many. There are many in this community. What we're experiencing now is not dissimilar from what's categorized as a traumatic experience. These things, if felt and kept and packaged in for too long, continue to damage not just the community, not just in rioting situations, but literally our physical selves. And if we're going to change the system, if we're going to make an impact, we need to be our best selves, our healthiest selves. So I implore, almost beg for our mental health professionals to dig and dive deep into the work of trauma care, community care, what it looks like to care for communities of color. I call on our leadership, whether you be pastors, members of faith, or otherwise. Don't be afraid to go there. Talk about it. We need to start talking about it. Martin Luther King is very often quoted in these situations, but he has also said that rioting is a language of the unheard. We need to start listening. We need to start listening if change is going to happen, and we need to know that it's okay to talk about these things. My heart is heavy because, like Reverend Hutcherson mentioned before, we have to think of the kids. They are watching us. They are watching us. They are watching to see what we do, how we act, how we respond, how we care. Do we care? So I call on our parents. I specifically am speaking to our Black parents. Talk to our kids. Guide our kids through this. Hear their questions. Do the research and get back to the work of leading up our community. As sad as I am to see the riot that took place last night, I get it. I get that frustration. Like I said, a week ago, I had some fire behind me that I didn't know would go away. Fortunately, I had a community, and I have my children to think of, and they need me there with them. Should the time come where I end up getting locked up for being on a protest line or riot line, I won't be able to guide them through that. I wouldn't be there with them. So I employ parents, Black parents, parents of color. Pay attention to our kids. Teachers, this year has done something crazy. Be with your kids, be with our kids. Listen to them. They are used to the words, they know it, they get it. And they have access to it more than I did when I was a kid. Teachers, be about that work of educating these kids. The last thing I'll say is if you do have something to say, and if you need a spot to get active, there are organizations, there are places that are ready and willing to hear you, to put that voice to use. We need your energy. Dig into your community, whether it be the NAACP, whether it be any of the hundreds of organizations that exist in this town. Tap into them, support them, volunteer, do the work of making sure that our communities are better. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Hutcherson. Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you very much. And I would like to, before taking questions, to give a few moments to my council members who are here and present. And I will start with our Vice Mayor, Mary Jane Dolan, Councilmember Randy Nelson, Councilmember Turner Perro, and Councilmember Sterling Wilder, because you need to hear all of our voices. Thank you.
Well, my hometown is Minneapolis, so I've been really devastated by what happened there. And I just want to say that I hope that this community will gather together and listen and quit talking about it. I think it is about time that we have to move forward and be equal and enjoy each other's company and lives in this community. I think the destruction that we're seeing around the country is just abhorrent. I understand the anger, I feel the anger myself, but it's really destroying the lives of many, many people. So I'm hoping that our community will come together in a totally different way. Thank you.
I've got to say that what I watched on the news last week from Minneapolis was gut-wrenching. As a period of time, many years ago, I was a police officer, and I know the responsibilities to serve and protect that weigh upon every police officer. I think that's what we have in abundance here in Lynchburg, dedicated public servants who respect the citizens of Lynchburg and everywhere and treat them as human beings. And it's a forfeiture of the uniform and of the badge for any law enforcement officer to even think about what I saw last week. And I understand the frustrations of those who feel like they are targeted by those who have authority. But ours is not here in Lynchburg to judge what someone in another state or another city did so recklessly and gruesomely. Ours is to take care and do what we can to fulfill what we know is right, what the law holds us to. And I am proud that those are the principles that Chief Zudema promotes every day among his force, our fire department, likewise. And this city council expects no less, not just from those who work for the city and protect the city and our citizens, but from everyone. But truly, it's a lesson in respect for humanity that we need, no matter who that is. We're all humans, we're all brothers and sisters, and we need to respect each other. And we all have talents that we can bring to a cause. And I hope that yesterday is behind us and before us is some very positive reconciliation. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Turner Pero, Lynchburg City Council member, and I just want to thank the mayor and the staff from the city of Lynchburg for pulling this together. I really want to commend your remarks, Madam Mayor. I think they were spot on, and I really don't have anything else to add to that other than this. Yeah, I'm praying for our city. I'm praying for all of us to take the high road, to do the better thing for all of humanity, for all of justice, for all people, not only in this city, but across this country. We can be better, as it was said earlier today. We can be so much better. And I pray that we have the individual fortitude and courage to do so. Thank you.
Again, thank you for the opportunity. Again, I appreciate our mayor and city manager for the work that they're doing, and our police chief for the work they're doing to keep our city calm. I continue, as Councilman Turner said, I pray for our community. One thing, when I look at the community, you see such a divide. You see either you're this or you're that. You're this color or you're that color. We need to remember, again, we are all one color. This color is red. We all need to come together as one person. We need to continue, as my brother said, listen and have a form, different forms where we can get that anger out. The anger is not destroying the property. When I go to Fifth Street, I think of M.W. Thornhill. I think of Dr. Hudson Sr. I think of all those persons that gave their lives to fight so that Fifth Street Mecca could be developed even stronger. So we made such a strong investment in the area. And last night to see that attacked, to see that city torn down, it broke my heart because, again, it's still Fifth Street, Martin Luther King Boulevard. We are stronger than that. So I know people are hurting. As an African-American male, I can understand your pain. I hear your pain. Again, we as a community, we need to come together. We need to be more stronger, united, when we listen to our other voices and see how we can continue to vote, how we can continue to come together to find solutions, how we continue to work together collectively so our voice is heard through NAACP, through the Voters League, to various other measures that we together are stronger when we're united. God bless you.
Thank you to all of my council members. Thank you. I will now take questions from anyone.
I have a question for the Chief. If you could tell us what the plans are for tonight, if there are more protests, to make sure that they don't get out of hand. And then also on the voluntary curfew, can you tell us what that really means and what it gives officers the authority to do, if anything?
Yeah, so the voluntary curfew, I'll address that first. That's voluntary. We are asking our great men and women in this city and families and fathers and brothers and sisters and mothers to recognize what's taking place in our city, what's taking place in our country, and understand that that curfew will allow our officers to better keep this city safe until, as you've heard several times, calmer heads can prevail. In terms of plans for the night, I absolutely will not get into specifics or operational details of what we're doing, but we will still have a large law enforcement presence. Some of that will be through the assistance of some of the agencies I mentioned to you earlier in my comment. We will be making sure that we are allowing those people who are the overwhelming majority who want to peacefully protest to do so without fear of the smaller group of folks who are the troublemakers of getting in the middle of that and creating a situation where they can't peacefully protest or where it puts their safety or our citizens' safety in danger. So that's our overall goal for this evening.
Ryan, Chief, when it comes to the militia guys, could you talk more about how they really came out? Because they said again, and you counted that someone called them to come out for help. And once you guys saw them there with AR-15s and all of that hardware, was there anything done to remove them or ask them to get away from the scene as other people were asked to be removed and get away from the scene?
Yeah, so again, a couple differentiations. Number one, as I stated before, we did not invite them. I don't know specifically who did invite them. I believe there is some social media out there that you could probably follow to track that. We did not ask them to be there, did not ask them to participate or partner with the Lynchburg Police Department or any other law enforcement agency that was involved last night. As far as asking them to leave, they were on private property with the consent of the owner. That is not something we can force them to leave from private property unless the owner tells them they have to leave and then they refuse to leave there.
When it comes to the question about what are you going to do now, with the LPD giving the protesters and all the people involved an opportunity to be peaceful and to see it not happen, why not just move to a definite demand in terms of restrictions and being out? Why give folks an opportunity for this stuff to happen again if it's voluntary?
That's something we're in the process of. We'll continue to reevaluate that on, quite honestly, an hourly basis if need be. We continue to gather intelligence on what may or may not be happening. We certainly plan for the worst and hope for the best, but that's something we continue. I'll have conversations with the city manager like I did all throughout last night into the early hours of this morning. I'll provide her with the most information I can, and then based on those conversations, she will obviously speak with the mayor and council members. Yep.
Quite frankly, the city does not have the authority to issue a compliant curfew order. We're working with our city attorney to get that authority and working with city council, so that is a work in progress. That is why we have to ask for initially a voluntary compliance with the curfew.
Was the 9:15 call that was described in the press release that we got earlier, was that the first response that officers had to that area, or were they there earlier at all? Check on things?
Our officers had monitored that area throughout the day. There had been protesters there, I think, as early as, don't quote me on this, but early to mid-afternoon, I believe. Actually, just prior to coming up here, I spoke with an individual who had a family member who was there who said that, one of our lieutenants had stopped by there to check on them and exchange phone numbers, and we're communicating. And again, the overwhelming majority of the people that were there yesterday peacefully protested for many, many hours. And then, unfortunately, once the sun went down, it's my understanding that that main group had left prior to that, and that either there was another faction that arrived or maybe was mingled in with them that stayed. So yeah, we had been up there, not for any calls for service per se, but just monitoring that, interacting with the individuals that were there protesting.
I've got a question for you, Mayor, if you don't mind. Just wondering, what are some of the things that you are hearing from the community as the leader of this city, other than some of the things that you've mentioned, and how are you doing?
The community, I understand, wants to be heard. There's an opportunity for everyone to have free speech, There's an opportunity for everyone to voice their frustration. But I want people to understand, I want our community, our protesters, those people, those bad actors who showed up last night at some point, we are obligated to keep our community safe. I want people to be able to go home after their expressions, their voices are heard, their peaceful protests to their families, to their kids. I want our officers to be able to go home to their kids. I want our city administration. I think as a community, we want the opportunity to have the ability to protest peacefully, but we also all want to remain in a safe community, a community that advances ideas and principles and policies and regulations. I want the community to know there is a process by which we advance all of that. And it works when we allow it to work. It can be frustrating, it can be lengthy, but that's why we make calls prior to now before everyone getting involved. Everyone coming out to meetings, everyone letting your voices be heard. We've come through the potential flooding of a dam, we've come through tornadoes, we've come through this pandemic that we're still in, signs. Everyone has a personal self-responsibility. I can look back at my council members, and for several weeks we've been going through a budget process every week. And I say, wear your mask, personal self-responsibility, accountability. It's on all of us to make the difference going forward. Not just for our community, we all have friends and relatives who live in all of these other cities who are being affected. We are at an unprecedented time in our era of living. And I don't know any community that has the playbook for that has the rules all in place for what we are seeing now. We have to come together, lock arms going forward, and make it happen in uncharted, unknown territory. But we have to stand on the side of right in this time and at this moment. You asked, how am I? I'm good. I'm good, because I know we're gonna get through this. I will tell you, it was more hurtful. I'm a mama to 2 African-American males and an African-American daughter. A grandmother to 2 African-American grandsons, and countless other kids that I just love. And to see the hurt in so many faces, to feel it in people's voices. Mamas are strong. Mamas in this country have always been strong. I want to say that I pray for all the families that have been affected by all of the violence we've seen in the past several weeks. I can't imagine losing a child or children to what other families have had to deal with. But I can pray. I always wake up knowing it's a new day to be better and to do better. And that's incumbent on all of us. Every single parent, mentor, teacher, leader, director, organization volunteer, we all now have a responsibility that you cannot wait to be told how you should feel, how you should react. I can't teach you anymore how to understand right is right, wrong is wrong. I don't think any of us want to teach any more of that. You have to know it, practice it, and live it now. And that's the only way going forward that's going to help us all come together. Thank you. Any more questions?
I got one more for Chief,
Yes.
and maybe for Carl B. You all.
I also have a question. Go ahead.
Chief and Reverend Hutchinson, when it comes to the community, a lot of people still feel as though that they've been treated unfairly, even in Lynchburg, and there's been excessive force I still get calls probably once a week. Dogs are being sicked on people, and somehow they're expected to be able to sit there and stay calm as the dog is gnawing on their leg. So with all this stuff happening nationally, just wondering what you both thought could be your responses to those who still feel mistreated by law enforcement, especially people of color.
So, Reverend Hutcherson and I spoke Saturday evening, I think, before any of this happened. We touched base with each other just to see kind of what the climate was, to understand each other, as you've heard. We've got to listen to each other, and I think, I won't speak for Reverend Hutcherson, but my responsibility as your chief of police here in this city is to make sure I understand how the black community feels about the things you were mentioning. And what better way to do that than sitting down with people like Reverend Hutcherson and other folks who I know kind of have the pulse of the African American community to help me understand, because I didn't grow up in that community. I've been in this city for 23 plus years now, and I still have a lot to learn. I think we all do. But this is going to be tough work. This is not something that we just wave a wand at, something we sit down at one meeting for 2 hours at, and all this is resolved. If we truly want to correct all the things that we're talking about today, this is something we all, as the mayor said, have to be committed to 100%. And this is absolutely not a sprint. This is a marathon. This is going to take some time, and the only way we are successful is if we all stay committed to it consistently, and we make sure we're willing to listen to each other.
Right. And Reverend, people are still saying, they're tired of talking. You guys mentioned listening and all of this. People are saying we're tired of talking. We want to see fair and equitable treatment concerning people of color in law enforcement.
And some of the complaints that you hear might be justified, can be justified. However, we understand that we still live in an imperfect world. We don't live in a perfect society. And so we have to work through and beyond some of the things that it takes in order to bring about some kind of resolution to various and sundry issues. And I think that's one of the things we must continue to do. One of the things that I've tried to do, Andre, at 76 years old, I have no business being the president of the NAACP. But people your age and younger won't step up and do it.
Another question? Oh, I'm sorry, did you have?
I have one for the chief as well.
Okay.
When did LPD become aware that these militia people were on the scene? Were they there when they got there? When were you guys aware that was?
I don't have an exact time. To my knowledge, and don't hold me to this because I showed up on the scene after quite some time after our officers had been there, but my understanding is that they showed up at some point. They were not there early in the afternoon, is my understanding. They showed up at some point during the protest, and they were there, to my knowledge, after kind of everything had cleared up early this morning.
Okay. Do you know if they were there when the call came in at 9:15?
I'm not sure. To be honest with you, I'd have to check into that.
All right.
Chief, can you talk about the decision-making and when to have officers intervene last night? And I guess, moving forward in any future protests, when to have them intervene, at what level, and then decisions on use of force in those situations and when to implement those things.
Yeah, so these are very dynamic situations. They can move from being very, very slow with not much going on to very quickly escalating. We were moving some folks around, trying to get them dispersed last night. And at one point, we had received communication back from some of the officers that were out that the numbers were down, they thought somewhere in the 20 to 25 range where they were at. They turned a corner and they said there was 125 people around the corner. So it's very challenging, especially again in an urban environment where some of your sight lines are often just a city block, especially in the Hill City where there's a lot of terrain and challenges to deal with that. The decision to use force is something we don't take lightly, that we always want to use the minimal amount of force necessary to accomplish our means. Last night we were there from the time we got the initial call around 9 o'clock, give or take, in the evening. We were there approximately 4 hours before we ever deployed any chemical agents. And, you know, that is something that we don't, again, take lightly. That we don't just walk up to a scene and say, oh, here's a crowd, we don't want them here, we're just going to deploy chemical agents. We spent a considerable amount of time, our officers showed, again, an incredible amount of restraint in trying to deal with those folks to allow them to have the opportunity to express their opinions and their views. Unfortunately, a lot of those individuals, not all of them, but a lot of those individuals decided they wanted to start committing criminal acts. And at that point, as the mayor said, we have a duty to keep our citizens safe. It can't be said any clearer or better than she said it. And I would be, and my officers would be derelict in our duty if we stood by and allowed criminal acts to continue to happen and jeopardize the safety of our citizens.
Chief, are you able to touch on at what point it went from a peaceful protest to when things escalated? Are you able to shed any light on what that turning point may have been?
I can't say specifically what that was. Obviously, you know, as the night grew on, I think people's patience wore a little more thin, and you know, I don't know what all the individual interactions were with different people who were there protesting. But again, once folks started committing criminal acts, we had a kind of a duty to step in.
In the event that something like this would ever happen again, and any militia groups want to offer their assistance, what's your message to them?
So we are well equipped as a police department, and we are well equipped with our neighboring law enforcement agencies to handle law enforcement services and needs in our community. You know, we certainly can't control what private businesses do or individuals do on their private property and who they allow on there, but the Lynchburg Police Department, in conjunction with our local and state partners, are well equipped to handle any type of critical incident or emergency in our city.
Chief, do you know if there was any connection to some of the folks that were at 5th and Federal that ended up, or did they go down to the ABC store and try to break in there? And then also on sidebar, you've always talked about needing more officers. With all this stuff happening nationally, and if it continues to trickle its way into Lynchburg, do you feel as though you have the manpower to do what you say you need to do, your force needs to do?
So first question, absolutely. The individual that was arrested in the area of the ABC store was one of the individuals that was previously at the 5th and Federal protest. So absolutely, I know for sure at least one of them was. I can't definitively say that some of the others were the same ones, but the one that was arrested in relation to the ABC store was definitely at 5th and Federal earlier in the evening. In terms of having enough manpower, you know, you've heard me stand in this room before and say, and you know, this is a very challenging time for us to recruit law enforcement officers. You know, during a pandemic and all the things we were trying to do with that, certainly now with all the things that have happened since Minneapolis, it creates challenges. We are definitely still in need of additional officers and certainly need to fill the positions we have. You know, I'll be in front of council at the end of this month providing a workload assessment that we had promised them this past year to be able to discuss through those things. But
last night, one of the things that they were talking about, they might initiate the militia showed up, they had seen some type of weapons that was brought in from the security. What would be you guys' message to the African American community, especially the African American males, when it comes to amplifiers, firearms, possession of firearms, or anything like that going forward? Because one of the things, the reason the question asked is, how do we positively educate any company, make a company, about far as carrying firearms inside the city of Lynchburg?
I can't say I completely understood what you said, BB. If I think, just tell me if I state this, just kind of what my message is to people carrying firearms in the city and their ability to lawfully do that?
Yeah, but one of the things, like I said, from the calls that I got, one of the things that through the escalation calls was when they seen other firearms being placed in. So the question becomes is, what would be your message or the mayor's message to anybody? Maybe it don't make a difference whether you couple fires, carrying firearms inside the city of Lynchburg, and what would you guys like to say as far as
Yes, I mean, I would refer them to the state law, certainly, and, you know, people have a lot of differing opinions on what should or shouldn't be, but the law allows folks to open carry firearms in the Commonwealth of Virginia, as long as they're not being brandished at someone, pointed at someone, or used to assault someone. The law allows folks to do that as long as they are legally allowed to possess those. You know, my message to anybody in any type of event like this is, you know, again, I think it goes back to the question that was asked up here is, you know, we are equipped as a law enforcement agency to handle those events, and you would ask the community to allow us to do that.
Thank you. I thank you all for the time. I thank everyone that has come today, and thank all the media. And we are expecting, we are praying, we are understanding that as a community we're going to move forward. We're going to do it together. We're going to abide by our law. We're going to respect those things that we need to do to make us a human, decent community. Love for humanity is what we have to have. Thank you very much.